Okay, so welcome to today's masterclass, Writing an Executive Summary. And an executive summary is usually part, in fact, it is part of a larger document. It is not a standalone, it's part of a larger document. And so, but it's actually a very important part of the document, and it has a specific purpose, a specific reason, and specific purpose for writing it. Okay, so the way I'd like us to approach this is to see some of the differences in the use of, I want to see whether my audio, please confirm that you can hear me okay.
Yes, we can hear you, Prof.
Oh, great, thank you. All right. So we have different sort of summaries that we use in writing, whether it is research or a technical report. They have different things you can do. So we were introduced to summary very early on in our education. I think as early as primary school, early secondary school, you would read, they'll give you a comprehension passage and they can ask you to summarize it. Or you have a literature book that you are supposed to read, and the task will be to summarize this book. And we were taught at that time that a summary is a condensed version of that document, of the book, of the novel, of the text, whatever it is that you are reading. A summary is a condensed version of it. So what you do with a summary is that you would have read the entire thing, and then you have to find a way to provide the key issues, thoughts, and ideas, and pass that across in much fewer words. So we took that learning into an abstract, which is a scientific paper, a research paper most often. And we have learned, many of us have learned, and probably we're still learning how to write an abstract, because an abstract is a condensed version of a scientific paper or document. But a summary, executive summary, is a little bit different. Yes, it is not the entire document, so it's a document, the write-up in a smaller form, in a condensed form. But it is a lot different, because you would need to be clear in your executive summary that you've added snapshots of the most critical information needed for decision making. While in a general summary, you will need to represent every section, especially if you are doing a structured summary. You need to represent every section in your summary. So if there is a book and it's 10 chapters, you will need to write something about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, especially if it's a structured summary. In an executive summary, you may not want to go in that order. You are just looking for, how do I pass across the most important information for an executive or a busy person who needs to use this information to take decisions. So while a summary is intended for everyone, and you may be summarizing something that somebody else has written or something that you have written. An abstract is intended for a scientific audience. You're going to submit an abstract, so you can make presentations, you can submit to a journal, and then it's expected that the journal will have readers and all of that. Or they will ask you to come and do a presentation in a conference or a meeting, and so on and so forth. The executive summary is really targeted at a distinct set of people. I've told the story of an elevator pitch before. I say, if you and the commissioner for health were to enter an elevator, and the elevator is moving from ground floor in your Ministry of Health to the 5th floor where her office is, you know you have about 1 minute, 2 minutes max to say something to her. And she says, look, tell me what I need to know about the last meeting you facilitated. What exactly must you say? That is what should go into an executive summary. You will not bother going into all the stories and details about who came, who said what, who did what. You would want to go straight into giving her the highlights and explaining to her what needs to be done from that meeting that you facilitated. So really, that's what an executive summary is. That's what an executive summary is. So unlike the other sort of summaries, where you want to provide a point of, you want to provide a summary, you want to provide a concise information from the bigger document, the purpose of an executive summary is to sell an idea or a position. That's really the purpose of an executive summary, is to sell, 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 is to provide decision makers with the tools they need from your experience and what the meeting you did, the project, whatever it is you wrote about in a larger form. If you only have 1 page or 2 pages to condense 58 pages, if you are doing that for an executive, you would need to be sure that you're able to bring out the must-knows and what needs to be done. Basically, what does the executive need to know and what needs to be done? So an executive summary always has some call for action in it. But when we get to the structure of an executive summary, we will look at that. So while a general summary and an abstract is usually structured, it may be unstructured, but even when it is unstructured, it follows a structure. So even if you don't put subheadings in your abstract, nobody is going to accept that you start with methodology and end up with, you start with methodology, go to conclusion, and then end up with results. Even if you don't write subheadings, there is still some structure to an abstract. Even if they don't say, they say it's unstructured, you do not need the subheadings of background, methods, result, and conclusion. In an abstract, there is still needs to be a logical way you present the information based on how the research was done or whatever. And an executive summary may be unstructured in the sense that it doesn't have headings. Most executive summaries do not have subheadings. A few do. And I will show you an example of an executive summary that has subheadings and one that doesn't have the subheadings, if we're able to find the time to get there. But there must be a logical pattern. And the logical pattern is a bit different for an executive summary than it is for a general summary and an abstract. A general summary and an abstract will follow the pattern, the chronological pattern of writing. So you wrote a background first, and you wrote a chapter 1, and you wrote a chapter 2, and all of that. It will basically follow it. But an executive summary doesn't follow that chronology, but it follows another type of logical pattern, and I'll be showing you. What's the length? There's really no word count for an executive summary. Unlike an abstract where they will peg a word count and say 250 words, 300 words, 500 words. Sometimes you say, okay, an extended abstract of up to 2,000 words for a book of conference proceedings. They will always peg a number of words. For a general summary, they'll say, okay, don't make it, it cannot be too long. Make sure that they're able to summarize the information in this book or whatever. For an executive summary, even though there is no word count, well, it better be short enough to get an executive to read. If it takes more than 3 minutes, maximum 5 minutes to read it, it's too long. It's too long if it takes more than 5 minutes to read and glean the most important information from it. It's really, really too long. So we must bear that in mind. So there's a principle called KISS. Keep it simple and short. Keep it simple and short. So a busy executive, if you call a busy executive on the phone and you're saying like, Governor, good morning, Your Excellency. He says, good morning. The next thing he wants you to hear is go straight to the point. How are you, ma? How is Her Excellency? How are the children? That is irritating to an executive because I don't have time. So go straight to the point. So keep it simple and short. So what kind of technical writing is involved? Remember, go back to all the classes we've done on technical writing. What type of technical writing is involved? It is mainly you will need the spectrum of technical writing skills. You will need descriptive, you will need analytical, you will need evaluative, and you will need reflective. And you will see it play out in what you're writing. So you must understand that unlike a general summary where you probably just be describing what happened in the book and in a condensed form, or what happened in the report in a condensed form, or an abstract that is basically descriptive, and then maybe towards the conclusion part, you can reflect on what does this mean and what needs to be done. In an executive summary, yes, we want you to do some description. Let us know, and I'll explain to you how that is done in the next couple of minutes. Yes, we want you to do a description. Yes, we want you to be analytical and give us some sort of breakdown. But most importantly, we want to see you evaluate the situation and tell the executive, this is what it means for you. This is what it means for your organization. This is what it portends. This is the information, and this is what you need to do with it. Basically, that's what the executive, it provides you with information for an executive and what they need to do with it. So if you don't put out what they need to do, you have missed an opportunity within your executive summary. So what would a good executive summary look like? Number one, it will answer the question why. And this is why I said that the logical sequence for an executive summary is different from that for an abstract or a summary. In an abstract, you will first of all answer the question what, then who, when, and where. Because in an abstract, it will tell you in the background, it will tell you, you would explain the problem or whatever, and then you will now go to the objective. Or in a summary, if you are writing a general report and you're trying to summarize it, maybe it was a meeting you facilitated. Okay, so the meeting was this was the meeting. It was a stakeholders meeting for whatever. It held at social place that you want to put all those details and you want to bring it out first. Then you now tell us what the objective of the meeting was. That's usually how you would write it, and that's how you would summarize the report. But in an executive summary, we tweak it. We will always start with why. Tell us why this executive should be reading this report. Tell us why this event happened. Tell us what was the purpose of the activity. Start with that, and then a bit of the rationale. So your first one, maximum 2 sentences should tell me why. So if I were to write an executive summary for him, what I'll be saying is that this meeting was for the purpose of bringing stakeholders to a consensus. A, B, C, X, Y, Z.
What all the emails he had sent.
So bringing stakeholders. This meeting was important as a means of bringing stakeholders to a consensus on ABCD-EFG. First statement. So the executive says, okay, yes, that's why we did that meeting. Then you now go to what was the meeting, who was at the meeting, when did the meeting hold, when did it hold. But very often, please be analytical rather than merely descriptive in explaining who, what, where, and when. Some people say executive summary needs to be a prose from start to finish. You can put a table in your executive summary if it gives you a summary of the key information. For example, if it was a 3-day training, you say a 3-day training, if it was residential, 3-day residential training, 3-day training held at so location. Below is a table summarizing participation. In that table, you say what sort of people attended, because an executive is not interested in 40 people attended the training. That's good information if you are tying it to that there was a target for 35 people, but 40 people attended. That's important. There must be a reason. Every bit of information you put in an executive summary must have a why, but there must be a reason. But rather, I would prefer to give a breakdown of the sort of stakeholders or the sort of executives. So I would say the leaders of NGOs, there were about 3 of them. Were principal investigators of different projects, there were about 3 of them. Government officials, there were about 5 of them. It is important for, if I believe that the executive needs to know the breakdown of the people who were there, so that he knows that, oh, these are the sort and caliber of kind of people who attended this meeting. Then I would need to put that. But I will show you the example. Then also you need to write down the methods and the processes relevant to the findings and relevant to the outcome. So this is when you say how. How did the meeting, what sort of meeting, how did it, what was the approach, what was the methodology for achieving that? Even if it is a technical guideline, a guideline for maybe malaria control or maybe non-communicable diseases, and you're looking at the federal government, Federal Ministry of Health guidelines for malaria prevention and control, you need an executive summary. And how those guidelines came to be developed should be in the executive summary in a summarized manner. All right. Then discuss the findings that are significant to the executive or to the reader or to the user. You do not need to discuss every finding. Do not make statements about every finding, except the executives have told you they want information about every finding. Summarize all your findings for us. Summarize. So that now goes beyond an executive summary and starts to border on just a summary. But you would think, and you will need to put on your thinking cap to say, what is the most important finding? And there's a concept called emerging issue. An emerging issue is positive or negative. It's not an emerging issue can be a challenge. It can also be an opportunity. So a challenge is a negative emerging issue. An opportunity is a positive emerging issue. And this is not how you pick up emerging issues is by being observant of the process. Maybe during the training or maybe during the stakeholders meeting, a representative from WHO was there and the representative for WHO pledged additional funding for the particular project. It is an emerging issue. You need set up for the stakeholders meeting for that to happen. But that has happened and it is significant because it's an opportunity that is going to impact on the project. And therefore, you will find a way to mention it and then now tell us what next. What should the organization do with that issue? It could be that the members of the community representatives came, because you're trying to do this project in the community, came and said clearly, their leader said clearly that this is not what they need. So you've gathered them together, you're having a meeting, and then somebody now says, look, I want to tell you, it's not our problem. That must feature in your reports. It must feature and it must be highlighted, must be clear in your executive summary, and then what needs to be done next. So let's share some practical tips very quickly, and then we'll go through the example, because really I think an example will not be effective. So tips for getting it right from the you must understand your terms of reference. You must understand your TR. For the assignment you are writing, you must understand the terms of reference. You must really have an idea. Try and see if you can get it to your executive, chief executive, the people who need it, who need to read our reports, get into their heads. What if it's possible to have a conversation with them? If it's possible to talk to somebody who knows what it is that they are looking for. Then your ability to apply critical thinking and analytical writing skills, be able to distill the must-knows. The must-knows, the why of the must-knows, and what the executive needs to do about it is very, very important. Very, very important. And then your ability you need to build your ability to communicate succinctly but sharply and concisely. All right, so let's go for an example. We'll stop sharing the screen now, and I will share with us hopefully 2 examples. Yes, they are here. Hopefully 2 examples. Please, if you have a question, go ahead and put the question in the chat box. We will take questions, and it may be faster if the questions are already in the chat. It may be faster because I'll try to see if we can leave 5 to 10 minutes at the end for a Q&A. But it will be faster if you have questions to put them in the chat box. Thank you. All right. So this is a 1-page executive summary, which I wrote. for a project, for a workshop I did in 2019. All right, so I want us to take 2 minutes. Some of you can even read it in 1 minute to read this executive summary. And then we will come and look at the elements. All right. Okay. So that's that example. I'd like us to look at another example, then we will come back to having a conversation. So I'm going to share that one. And these two examples will be part of your package so that you can make reference. Okay, so this is a more recent one. And this is actually a longer read, so I'll give you a few minutes. I need to say that this is one of the longest executive summaries I have read. I have written. And that was because of the amount of detail I was asked to put in. I was specifically asked to make it 3 pages. I put in it. This was a report of about 100+ pages, the entire report. So to even condense it into this number of pages was a task. So you can see that an executive summary, there isn't really, so to buttress what I said, executive summary doesn't really have, let me stop sharing. Executive summary doesn't really have a prescribed number of words. Doesn't really have a prescribed number of words. An executive summary, you can see that this, I don't know what I would say, is semi-structured because I have one subheading. I have one subheading here. That's the summary. Okay? I have one subheading here. That's the summary. But basically, if you look at the structure that we discussed for an executive summary, that you start with why. You start with why. It says in February 2019, NLNG did this, that, to do this. This plan aligns with the national, which identifies the country's malaria elimination strategy. So we didn't start with 2019, AOP was held in Tuesday, so date, and so place. No, you start with why. So you always start with why. And then if you look at the other one, I think I need to share this in a different way so that I can be going from one screen to the other. All right. Very good. Now, if you look at the other one, if you look at the other example, you will see a similar approach. The first paragraph, the first few sentences, by the time we're coming to the second, third sentence, we're explaining why this evaluation was done. So this is an executive summary for the report of an evaluation. The one I had shown you previously is the executive summary for a report of a meeting that was facilitated. So the type of report will dictate the flair, how exactly the executive summary looks like. But there are certain principles. So make sure that you establish in your first few sentences, then come and give us the details. You see that in both reports, when the activity held and who was involved in it is always written. You must always say so. So if the executive summary doesn't have that, it's difficult for you to conclude that you've done a good job as an executive summary, with an executive summary. Then your methods. You see that your methods, how long it happened, what methods did you use, and so on and so forth. Also quite important. Then the major thing you focus on is what did you find and what does it mean for the chief executive. What did you find and what does it mean? So let me show you the other one. Okay, show you the example. All right. So this is the results, the outputs of that meeting, the 21 specific objectives, 44. So this is the way to be analytical in your summary. You see the use of numbers here. So we're not just saying many activities the team came up with a lot of specific objectives and there were many major activities and plenty. No. Then it was strategic to put the cost of the AOP here because this is an annual operational plan that government needs to pool resources, allocate resources to. So the executive needs to know, the Commissioner for Health needs to look at this executive and say, okay, how much is this thing going to cost us? So in the evaluation, in the evaluation example, there was no amount, there was no money. How much we spent during the evaluation wasn't important. What was important was the findings of the health of the people. But here, it's important the summary of the documents, including and especially how much money was spent. Because so this comes with knowing your terms of reference and knowing what the executive wants. Now, the reason for this breakdown is that this executive summary can be shared with the different departments in the Ministry of Health, and each department can take the part that is theirs. And then the executive can see, you see the analysis that was done and proportions that were done here. This is part of an executive summary. The executive can see what was the allocation, the percentage, which of the thematic areas or objective areas is taking the most amount of money. Oh, we need to pay attention to PS. PSM is procurement and supply chain management, by the way. Oh, we need to pay attention to that. And then you now see that a statement about the emerging issue and what the owners of this project need to do is there, even if it's a few lines. The fact that the ownership rests, important to state that the ownership is not with because an organization sponsored this AOP. So they needed it to be clear that the implementation, we are sponsoring the development, but the implementation is with government. It has to come out here. And then anything that is an innovation that can help also needs to come out. So let's go back to the other one, and you basically use an executive summary to steer the leadership in the direction that you think, based on your expertise, that they should be going. So you see here that because there were a lot of findings, a lot of aspects of this evaluation, we try to bring out the most important aspects and then add what needs to be done, bring out the most important aspects, add what the executive needs to be done. This implies the need to include demand creation and health promotion intervention as part of OHP. Poor utilization, decline in health facility, program manager needs to resolve. So there is something that the executive can take and say, oh, this is my action. This is what I need to do. Then we put it again in a table. So you can put, if you have more than one issue, emerging issue and recommendation, it's best to put it in a table. Because what that does is that it makes it very clear. Because prose things can get lost. It makes it very clear what it is that you are supposed to do. All right. I'm going to stop there and see if you can take questions for the next 8 minutes or so that we have. We are at 100. I think this account can take more than 100. So I hope people are not struggling to come. Documents will be shared. Documents will be shared. Recording will be shared. Questions, please. Any questions? Any comments? You can do a show of hands, or you can put your question in the chat box. We have a few minutes to go. All right. Okay, so if we have, since we have a bit of time, and yeah, to get, I'll take questions if you have. Since we have a bit of time, I want to show us. Okay, so let's have some fun in another 2 or 3 minutes. I want us to quickly read through this executive summary. It's taken from a document, and I'll share the document. So the National Tobacco Control Strategic Plan of Action 2024-2028. And this is the executive summary. Now, the beautiful thing is that this document has an executive summary. There are many documents like this that do not have an executive summary. So if you are the executive reading through this, I want us to read through it together and see if we can do some sort of critique of, okay, this was done very well. Okay, this could have been done better, just to see if you can apply your learning. I was going to send it to us, but I think we have a bit of time, we can tackle it together. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. So I'll use my reading pace. All right. Can I have comments in the chat box of what do you think is missing? What do you think is missing? What do you think is missing? Yes, Shirley, you can use charts in an executive summary. If that chart will drive home the message, go for it. So a communicator talks about the key findings and points from a meeting for consumption of government stakeholders and the public. So it's not really a summary, although summary is a part of it. But if you are putting a report together of the meeting and the information that the owners of that meeting want the public to know or want stakeholders to know and actions they want them to take, that's information. Okay, so I'm getting feedback that the summary is descriptive, not analytical. I agree 100%. They said agencies. I probably would have said you can't list all of them. When you have 25 line agencies, 5 NGOs, often a small table that shows the distribution of the different sort of partners that were involved in the project. Yes. So more analytical, it can be more analytical than descriptive. So this will make you believe in your cutting grass where I am, so it's very annoying. Okay, let's see whether this is better. So I agree with the fact that it should have been more analytical. We should have been presented with more facts. I would have this part about 5 priority areas for work. I would have done a table here where I would list the priority areas and their key strategic objectives and their indicators without making it too bulky. If you have a 2-page executive summary that shows what the objectives are, then I don't even need to open the document and see the objectives. I know this is what they want to achieve. I could have done that. Probably that would have been my own approach to writing this executive summary. All right. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time. Like I said, the recording and the documents will be forwarded to us for us to go play back and for us to be able to use it in the future. So thank you for attending. Thank you for your time. We're trying to keep the time. I appreciate everyone. See you at the next masterclass. Information will come around to you when that time is there. Bye-bye. Have a good day, everyone.